Stop lying to me, Nia. Gideon Strathmore's voice thunders through their Manhattan penthouse, rain lashing the windows. Nia Zokora, luminous in her magenta maternity dress, thin straps framing her shoulders, clutches her 7-month pregnant belly, her sleek, waist-length hair a cascade of black silk. She's the brilliance behind Strathmore and Zokora Ventures, but Gideon's jealousy consumes him. In a rage, he strikes her, fists pounding, then delivers a savage kick to her stomach. Blood seeps through her dress, a scarlet wound against the magenta. Nia collapses, her cry echoing with Harlem's jazz ghosts. What fuels such cruelty? Can Nia rise from this agony? Will her vengeance shatter Gideon's empire? Her justice will burn brighter than his betrayal. The rain-slicked windows of the Upper East Side penthouse framed a Manhattan skyline that shimmered like a jazz melody, its lights pulsing in rhythm with the city's restless heart. Nia Zokora stood by the glass, her magenta maternity dress clinging softly to her 7-month pregnant frame, thin straps accentuating her elegant shoulders. Her sleek waist-length hair, black as a moonless Harlem night, cascaded in a glossy wave, catching the glow of the chandelier. Her hand rested on her belly, where Jelani, her unborn son, named for the Swahili word meaning mighty, stirred with gentle kicks. The name came from her grandmother's stories, whispered over cornbread and collard greens in a Harlem brownstone, tales of ancestors who carried strength across oceans. Nia's fingers traced the silver ring on her left hand, a family heirloom etched with a faint crescent moon, a reminder of that resilience. She turned from the window, her reflection briefly merging with the city's glow. The penthouse was a masterpiece of modern opulence. Marble floors, a sleek leather sofa, and a Basquiat painting dominating one wall, its vibrant chaos mirroring her own ambition. Nia was the architect of Strathmore and Zokora Ventures' financial triumphs, her strategies turning their small inheritance, her grandmother's savings from a Harlem seamstress shop, into a Wall Street empire. Yet the weight of her success felt heavier lately, as if the city's lights were dimming just for her. Gideon Strathmore entered, his navy suit tailored to perfection, blonde hair swept back, exuding the effortless charm that closed million-dollar deals. "Another late night, Nia?" he asked, his voice smooth but edged with something unspoken, like a saxophone hitting a sour note. He crossed the room, pouring a glass of bourbon from a crystal decanter, the amber liquid catching the light. Nia smiled, her hair swaying as she moved to the sofa. "Just reviewing the Dubai portfolio. We're ahead of projections." Her voice was calm, but her eyes searched his, seeking the warmth they once shared. Gideon sipped his drink, leaning against the bar. "You should ease up. The baby needs you more than those numbers." His tone carried a patronizing lilt, as if her brilliance was a hobby to be shelved. Nia's fingers tightened around the silver ring. "Jelani's fine, Gideon, and so am I. This is our company, not just yours." Her words were measured, but they carried the weight of their shared history, a decade of late nights, shared dreams, and her grandmother's inheritance that gave them their start. He chuckled, but it didn't reach his blue eyes. "Of course, darling, but Wall Street's a man's game. Let me handle the heavy lifting." The words stung, slicing through the melody of their past. Nia stood, her magenta dress flowing like a vibrant cord, her hair a dark cascade against her back. "I've been lifting with you since Chicago," she said, her voice steady. "My strategies close Dubai. Don't forget that." Gideon's jaw tightened, but he waved a hand dismissively, turning to the window where the rain traced restless patterns. The Basquiat painting seemed to watch them, its jagged lines echoing the tension. Nia remembered their first meeting at a Chicago finance summit, two hungry outsiders with big dreams. Her calculations, rooted in the discipline her grandmother taught her, stitching dreams from scraps, paired with Gideon's charisma, had built their empire. But lately his interviews on CNBC called Strathmore and Zokora his vision, erasing her from the narrative. The silver ring glinted as she adjusted her dress, a silent vow to hold her ground. A soft jazz tune drifted from the penthouse's sound system, Ella Fitzgerald's "Summertime," filling the air with its haunting warmth. Nia closed her eyes, transported to her grandmother's Harlem kitchen, where the same song played while they kneaded cornbread dough. "You're stronger than they'll ever know, Nia," her grandmother had said, her voice a melody of survival. Nia opened her eyes, meeting Gideon's gaze. "I'm going to the Harlem jazz event tomorrow," she said. "Malik Touri's speaking. He's impressed with our Dubai deal." Gideon's glass paused midair, his eyes narrowing. "Tour? That guy's always sniffing around." His voice carried a jealous edge, sharp as the city's skyline. Malik, a Senegalese-American investor with a rival firm, had long admired Nia's acumen, their banter at industry events light but professional. Nia tilted her head, her hair shimmering. "He's a colleague, Gideon, nothing more." But his silence was heavy, like the rain now pounding harder outside. She crossed to the bar, pouring herself a glass of sparkling water, the bubbles catching the light like tiny stars. "We're a team," she said softly, hoping to bridge the growing chasm. Gideon set his glass down, his fingers brushing her arm, but the touch felt possessive, not tender. "Just focus on our son," he said, his voice low. "That's what matters." Nia stepped back, her magenta dress vibrant against the penthouse's muted tones, her hair a sleek curtain framing her resolve. "Jelani's my priority," she said, "but so is our legacy." As she turned away, the jazz melody swelled, Ella's voice a reminder of Harlem's enduring spirit. Nia's hand rested on her belly, feeling Jelani's kick, a promise of strength. Outside, Manhattan's lights flickered, as if sensing the storm brewing within these walls. Gideon watched her, his expression unreadable, but the air crackled with unspoken tension. Nia's silver ring gleamed, a beacon of her heritage, whispering that she was more than his shadow. The city pulsed below, waiting for the melody of their lives to shift into harmony or discord. Only the coming days would tell. The notes of a saxophone curled through the smoky air of the Harlem Jazz Club, a low, mournful wail that seemed to carry Nia Zokora's heart in its melody. She sat at a corner table, her magenta maternity dress glowing under the dim amber lights, its thin straps framing her shoulders like delicate threads of defiance. Her sleek, waist-length hair cascaded in a glossy wave, catching the flicker of candles on the table. Her hand rested on her belly where Jelani's gentle kicks pulsed in time with the music, a reminder of the life she carried. The silver ring on her finger, etched with a crescent moon from her grandmother's Harlem days, glinted as she sipped sparkling water, its bubbles sharp against her lips. This was her sanctuary, a place where the city's pulse slowed, and the jazz, Ella Fitzgerald's My Funny Valentine Tonight, wove stories of survival her grandmother once sang. Nia's eyes, dark and reflective, scanned the room. The club was alive with Harlem's spirit, couples swaying to the rhythm, laughter mingling with clinking glasses, and the scent of cornbread and bourbon lingering in the air. She was here for a charity event, a rare moment to connect with her roots while networking for Strathmore and Zokora ventures. Yet her heart was heavy, the memory of Gideon's dismissive words from the penthouse still stinging. "Wall Street's a man's game," he'd said, as if her brilliance was a footnote in his story. She straightened, her hair swaying like a curtain of resolve, determined to prove him wrong. Malik Tour approached, his tailored blazer sharp against the club's warm glow. A Senegalese-American investor with a rival firm, he carried an easy confidence that never crossed into arrogance. "Nia, you outdid us on that Dubai deal," he said, his smile genuine, eyes crinkling with respect. "You're a force." Nia's lips curved, a spark of pride igniting in her chest. "Just doing my job, Malik," she replied, her voice smooth but laced with the weight of her recent battles. Her hand grazed the silver ring, grounding her in her grandmother's mantra. "We rise, no matter the storm." Across the room, Gideon watched from a shadowed corner, his bourbon glass sweating in his hand. His blue eyes narrowed, tracking Malik's every move. The jazz, meant to soothe, only amplified the knot in his gut. Nia's laugh, a rare melodic sound, felt like a betrayal, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Was it the way Malik leaned in, or how Nia's hair shimmered as she tilted her head? He gripped his glass tighter, the amber liquid trembling. She was his wife, his partner, carrying his child. Yet the sight of her ease with another man twisted something dark inside him. He'd built their empire, hadn't he? Her brilliance was his to claim, wasn't it? Nia felt his gaze, a prickle on her skin like the rain outside. She turned, meeting his eyes, and saw not the man she'd fallen for in Chicago, but a stranger cloaked in suspicion. Her heart sank, a dull ache spreading where love once bloomed. She adjusted her magenta dress, its vibrant hue a shield against his silent accusations. "Malik's just a colleague," she told him countless times, but the words felt like shouting into a void. She wanted to cross the room, to remind Gideon of their shared dreams, but the weight of Jelani's kicks anchored her. She wouldn't beg for trust she'd already earned. Malik excused himself, leaving Nia alone with the jazz. The saxophone wove a tale of longing, echoing her grandmother's stories of Harlem nights, where women like her danced through pain to find strength. She closed her eyes, the music washing over her, and saw her grandmother's face, lined with wisdom, singing of survival. "Men will try to dim your light, Nia," she'd said over cornbread in their brownstone kitchen. "Don't let them." Nia's fingers tightened around the silver ring, its crescent moon a promise she'd keep shining. Gideon approached, his steps heavy, the bourbon loosening his restraint. "Enjoying yourself?" he asked, his voice low, edged with a venom that made Nia's stomach twist. She opened her eyes, her hair a sleek curtain as she faced him. "It's work, Gideon. Networking. For our company." Her tone was steady, but her heart raced, a mix of defiance and dread. He leaned closer, his breath warm with alcohol. "You're too friendly with Toure. People notice." The accusation hung between them, sharp as the saxophone's wail. Nia's hand rested protectively on her belly. Jelani's kick a quiet rebellion against the tension. "People notice my work," she said, her voice firm, the magenta dress vibrant against the club's shadows. "You used to notice it too." Gideon's jaw clenched, his eyes flickering with something between anger and shame. He turned away, the jazz swallowing his response, but the air crackled with unspoken threats. Nia watched him retreat, her heart a battlefield of love and disillusionment. The silver ring gleamed, a beacon of her grandmother's strength, whispering that she was more than his doubts. As the rain pounded harder outside, the jazz carried her resolve, a melody of survival that would guide her through the gathering storm. The rain lashed against the penthouse windows, a furious rhythm that mirrored the storm brewing within Nia Zokora. She stood in the living room, her magenta maternity dress clinging to her 7-month pregnant frame, its thin straps a fragile contrast to the strength in her dark eyes. Her sleek, waist-length hair spilled over her shoulders like black silk, swaying as she faced Gideon Strathmore. The silver ring on her finger, etched with her grandmother's crescent moon, glinted under the chandelier's glow, anchoring her to the resilience of her Harlem roots. Jelani, her unborn son, kicked softly, a quiet pulse of hope amidst the tension. The memory of the Harlem Jazz Club lingered. Ella Fitzgerald's melody, the warmth of cornbread, and Gideon's accusing glare. Now that glare burned hotter, his bourbon-soaked breath tainting the air. Gideon paced, his navy suit rumpled, blonde hair disheveled from running his hands through it. "I saw you with Toure," he growled, his voice a jagged edge, slicing through the penthouse's opulent silence. "Don't lie to me, Nia." His blue eyes, once warm with ambition, now blazed with a jealousy that twisted his handsome features into something unrecognizable. Nia's heart pounded, a mix of disbelief and defiance. She adjusted her dress, its vibrant magenta a beacon of her strength, and took a step forward. "Malik's a colleague," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "You're inventing stories, Gideon. You're letting paranoia destroy us." He stopped pacing, his fists clenching. The Basquiat painting on the wall seemed to pulse with chaotic energy, mirroring the turmoil between them. "Destroy us?" he spat, his voice rising like the rain's crescendo. "You're the one destroying us. Laughing with him, flaunting yourself at that club." Nia's breath caught, her hand instinctively cradling Jelani, the silver ring pressed against her palm, a reminder of her grandmother's words. "Men will try to break you, Nia. Stand tall." She did, her hair a glossy curtain framing her resolve. I was working, she said, her tone sharp. For our company, for our son. Why can't you trust me? Gideon's laugh was bitter, a sound that clawed at her soul. Trust you? When you're out there with Toure, acting like I'm nothing? His words were a poison, seeping into the cracks of their once unbreakable bond. Nia's eyes stung, but she refused to let tears fall. She thought of her grandmother's Harlem kitchen, the scent of cornbread, the jazz records spinning tales of survival. You're everything to me, she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of a love she still clung to. But you're pushing me away. Her magenta dress glowed under the light, a defiant contrast to the darkness in his gaze. He stepped closer, his shadow looming. Is it his? He demanded, pointing at her belly, his voice a low snarl. The question was a dagger, piercing Nia's heart. Her hand tightened on the silver ring, its crescent moon biting into her skin. How dare you, she gasped, her hair swaying as she stepped back, shock flooding her veins. Jelani is ours, you know that. But Gideon's eyes were wild, consumed by a jealousy that drowned out reason. The rain roared outside, a mirror to his fury. Nia's chest heaved, her love for him warring with the betrayal of his words. She wanted to reach for him, to pull back the man she'd loved in Chicago, but he was gone, lost in a storm of his own making. You're lying, Gideon roared, his face contorted. He lunged, shoving Nia with a force that sent her stumbling against the sofa. Her hair spilled forward, a dark veil, as she caught herself, hands flying to protect Jelani. Gideon, stop, she cried, her voice breaking, but he was beyond hearing. In a blind rage, he struck her, his fist slamming into her shoulder, then another blow to her side. Pain flared, sharp and searing, but it was his final act that shattered her world, a brutal kick to her stomach, deliberate and merciless. Nia crumpled, a scream tearing from her throat, raw and guttural, as blood bloomed across her magenta dress, a crimson stain spreading like a wound on her soul. Her hair fanned across the marble floor, a stark contrast to the chaos within. She clutched her belly, Jelani's kicks faltering, each one a fading note in her heart's melody. The silver ring pressed against her skin, a lifeline to her grandmother's strength, but the pain was overwhelming, a white-hot inferno. Gideon froze, his rage draining as he saw the blood, his face paling. Nia, he whispered, but she couldn't hear him over her own ragged sobs. The jazz in her mind, her grandmother's voice singing, God bless the child, faded into silence, replaced by the rain's relentless drum. Her vision blurred, the penthouse's lights dimming as she clung to Jelani's name. A prayer, a promise. The world slipped away, leaving only the echo of her scream and the crimson ruin of her magenta dress. The hospital room was a sterile cage of white, its walls swallowing sound except for the relentless beep of machines, a cruel metronome to Nia Zokora's shattered heart. She lay in the bed, her once vibrant magenta maternity dress now crumpled and stained with dried blood, its thin straps sagging against her bruised shoulders. Her sleek, waist-length hair, once a cascade of black silk, hung limp, strands clinging to her tear-streaked face. Her hand rested on her now still belly, where Jelani, her mighty warrior, named for the strength of her ancestors, had ceased to stir. The silver ring on her finger, etched with a crescent moon from her grandmother's Harlem days, pressed into her skin, a fragile tether to the world she'd lost. Each breath was a battle, her chest heavy with a grief that threatened to drown her. Nia's eyes, swollen from crying, stared at the ceiling, where fluorescent lights cast a cold glare. The pain in her body, bruises blooming on her arms, a dull ache where Gideon's kick had landed, was nothing compared to the void where Jelani's kicks once danced. She could still hear her own scream from the penthouse, raw and guttural, mingling with the rain's roar. The memory of Gideon's face, pale with fleeting regret, haunted her. But it was his betrayal, his fists, his foot, that carved a wound deeper than flesh. Her fingers clutched the silver ring, its crescent moon a faint echo of her grandmother's voice, singing God bless the child over cornbread in their Harlem brownstone. You're stronger than the pain, Nia, she'd said. But now strength felt like a distant melody, drowned by sorrow. A nurse entered, her footsteps soft, her eyes kind but heavy with pity. "Mrs. Strathmore, the doctor needs to speak with you," she said gently. Nia flinched at the name, her lips tightening. "Zokora," she corrected, her voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. "My name is Nia Zokora." The nurse nodded, retreating, and Nia's gaze drifted to the window, where Manhattan's skyline loomed, its lights blurred by rain. The city that had crowned her a financial queen now felt like a stranger, its pulse mocking her loss. She thought of her grandmother's stories, of women who wove resilience from grief, their voices rising in Harlem's jazz clubs like prayers. Could she find that strength now, when her world lay in ruins? Dr. Ellis, a woman with tired eyes and a warm voice, entered, sitting beside Nia's bed. "Nia, we did everything we could," she said, her words careful but heavy. "Your son, he didn't make it. I'm so sorry." The confirmation was a knife twisting in Nia's chest. Jelani, her warrior, gone. She closed her eyes, a sob catching in her throat, and saw her grandmother's face lined with wisdom, singing of survival. "He was Jelani," Nia whispered, the name a sacred vow. Dr. Ellis squeezed her hand. "We had to stabilize you. The trauma was severe." Nia nodded, numb, her hair spilling across the pillow, a dark veil over her pain. Outside, she knew Gideon waited, playing the grieving husband, spinning lies about a fall on a slick floor. Her mother, Amina, had called, her voice trembling through the phone, offering to bring cornbread and comfort from Harlem. But Nia refused visitors, even her mother. The thought of Gideon's face, his blue eyes, once her anchor, now her torment, made her stomach churn. Her love for him, built over a decade of shared dreams, had burned to ash in that penthouse. In its place, a new fire kindled, small but fierce, fueled by the memory of Jelani's kicks and the blood on her magenta dress. She traced the silver ring, its crescent moon a beacon in the fog of her grief. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Zola, her childhood friend from Harlem, slipped in, carrying a small tin of cornbread, its warm scent a faint echo of home. "Nia," Zola whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "I'm here." Nia managed a weak nod, her hair shifting as she turned her head. "He took Jelani," she murmured, her voice cracking. Zola sat beside her, taking her hand, the silver ring cool against their touch. "You're still here," Zola said, "and you're stronger than he'll ever know." The words stirred something in Nia, a spark beneath the weight of loss. She thought of her grandmother's jazz, the way it turned pain into power, note by note. The hospital's white walls seemed to close in, but Nia's mind wandered to Harlem, to the nights her grandmother sang of resilience, her voice a melody of defiance. "When the world breaks you, Nia, build something new," she'd said, kneading cornbread dough. Nia's fingers tightened around the silver ring, her grief hardening into resolve. Gideon's betrayal had stolen her son, but it wouldn't steal her spirit. The fire within her grew, a quiet, searing promise. She wasn't just a widow to her dreams, she was Nia Zokora, forged in Harlem's heart, and she would rise. The rain outside softened, but the storm in her soul was just beginning, a jazz riff waiting to crescendo. The Harlem brownstone smelled of cornbread and history, its walls lined with faded photos of jazz singers and family gatherings, a sanctuary where Nia Zokora sought refuge. She sat on her mother Amina's worn velvet couch, wrapped in a loose sweater, her once vibrant magenta maternity dress, now a blood-stained memory locked away in a hospital bag. Her sleek, waist-length hair hung in a loose braid, its gloss dulled by grief, strands slipping free to frame her tear-worn face. The silver ring on her finger, etched with her grandmother's crescent moon, pressed into her palm, a lifeline to the strength of her Harlem roots. Her body ached, each bruise a reminder of Gideon Strathmore's brutality. But it was the silence where Jelani's kicks once lived that tore at her soul. Her heart was a hollow drum, beating with loss. Amina moved quietly in the kitchen, her hands kneading cornbread dough, the rhythm as steady as the jazz playing softly from an old radio. John Coltrane's A Love Supreme, a prayer in notes. Nia's eyes, swollen and distant, traced the room. A photo of her grandmother singing at a Harlem club, her voice a beacon of defiance. a quilt stitched with stories of ancestors who survived worse storms. "You're still here, baby," Amina said, her voice warm but heavy, setting a plate of cornbread before Nia. The scent stirred memories of childhood, of her grandmother's tales over steaming plates, whispering, "We rise, Nia, no matter how deep the cut." But now the cut was too deep, Jelani's absence a wound that bled invisibly. Nia's fingers tightened around the silver ring, its crescent moon biting into her skin. She hadn't cried since the hospital, her tears replaced by a fire kindling in her chest, not yet ablaze but a spark, sharp and unyielding. Gideon's lies echoed in her mind. His claim of a fall, his crocodile tears outside her hospital room. She saw his face, those blue eyes once her anchor, now a symbol of betrayal. Her love for him, forged in Chicago's hopeful nights, had crumbled under his fists, his foot. But in that rubble, something new was forming, a resolve as fierce as the jazz swelling around her, Coltrane's notes urging her to fight. She rose, her braids swaying, and crossed to a small desk where Amina kept family papers. Hidden among them was a folder from Strathmore and Zokora Ventures, its contents a revelation. Nia's name, Zokora, on every major document, sole shareholder of their core funds, a legacy of her grandmother's inheritance. Gideon, in his arrogance, had never questioned her legal power, assuming her brilliance was his to wield. Her heart raced, not with pain, but with purpose. The silver ring gleamed, a promise of justice. She wasn't just a widow to her dreams, she was a warrior, forged in Harlem's fire. Amina watched, her eyes soft but searching. "What's in your head, Nia?" she asked, setting down a mug of tea. Nia's lips parted, her voice low but steady. "He took Jelani," she said, each word a stone laid on a new foundation. "But he won't take me." Amina nodded, her silence a blessing, as if she heard the same jazz notes urging Nia forward. The cornbread sat untouched, its warmth a quiet reminder of home. But Nia's hunger was for something else, retribution. She left the brownstone, her braids swinging, and walked to a nearby Harlem cafe, its windows fogged with steam, the air thick with coffee and saxophone riffs. There she met Zara Kimbrough, a lawyer known as Wall Street's Reaper, her sharp blazer as fierce as her reputation. Nia, in her sweater, hair still a sleek cascade despite her grief, slid the folder across the table. "Gideon thinks he owns our empire," she said, her voice a blade honed by loss. "But it's mine. I want him to lose everything, his power, his pride, his soul." Zara's eyes, dark and unyielding, scanned the papers, a slow smile curving her lips. "He underestimated you," she said. "That's his funeral." Nia's heart thudded, a mix of sorrow and steel. She thought of Jelani, his name a melody she'd whispered in the night, a promise unfulfilled. The cafe's jazz, Nina Simone's "Feeling Good Now," swirled around her, its defiance echoing her own. "I want him to feel what I feel," Nia said, her fingers tracing the silver ring. "Empty, broken." Zara leaned forward, her voice low. "We'll build his ruin, piece by piece, legal, psychological, total." Nia nodded, the spark in her chest flaring brighter, a fire fed by her grandmother's jazz and Jelani's memory. Outside, Harlem streets pulsed with life, vendors calling, music spilling from bars. Nia stood, her braid a dark ribbon against her back, her resolve as vibrant as the magenta dress she'd once worn. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy, charged with the storm she'd unleash. Gideon thought he'd broken her, but he'd only forged her anew. The silver ring gleamed, a crescent moon rising in her soul, whispering that justice was coming, not just for her, but for Jelani, her mighty warrior whose name would echo in Gideon's ruin. The air in the Manhattan boardroom was sharp with the scent of polished wood and ambition, but Nia Zokora carried a fire colder than the city's steel skyline. She sat at the edge of the Strathmore and Zokora Ventures table, her sleek, waist-length hair braided tightly, a dark rope of resolve against her cream silk blouse. The magenta maternity dress, once vibrant, was now a blood-stained memory, but its echo lingered in her fierce gaze. Her fingers grazed the silver ring etched with a crescent moon, a Harlem heirloom from her grandmother. grounding her in the pain and purpose that fueled her. Jelani's absence was a hollow ache in her chest, but it sharpened her focus, each heartbeat a vow to make Gideon Strathmore feel the void he'd carved. The jazz of Nina Simone's Feeling Good, heard in that Harlem cafe with Zara Kimbrough, still hummed in her veins, a defiant melody urging her forward. Nia's eyes, dark and unyielding, scanned the room. The boardroom's glass walls framed Manhattan's glittering towers, a kingdom she'd built with her brilliance, now tainted by Gideon's betrayal. She clutched a burner phone, bought from a Harlem street vendor, its anonymity her first weapon. Her heart thudded, not with fear, but with a calculated rage, honed by the memory of blood seeping through her dress, of Jelani's kicks fading. Zara, the lawyer with a reputation as Wall Street's reaper, sat beside her, her sharp blazer a mirror to Nia's resolve. "Ready?" Zara whispered, her voice a low note of conspiracy. Nia nodded, her braids swaying, the silver ring glinting. "He'll feel it," she said, her voice steady, a blade forged in grief. She sent the first message from the burner phone. "She's mine now, stay away." The words were simple, venomous, aimed at Gideon's phone, designed to pierce his paranoia. Nia pictured him in his office, his blonde hair disheveled, blue eyes wild as he read it, her lips curved, not a smile but a promise. The memory of his fist, his foot, flashed, her body bruised, her son stolen. Yet in this boardroom, she was no victim. She was Nia Zokora, Harlem-born, granddaughter of a jazz singer who wove strength from pain. The silver ring pressed into her palm, a crescent moon whispering her grandmother's words. "Build from the ashes, Nia." Later that evening, Nia slipped into a Harlem jazz bar, its smoky air thick with the wail of a trumpet. Miles Davis, "So What," weaving through the crowd. Her braid loosened, her hair cascading in glossy waves, a nod to the woman she'd been before the hospital. She wore a black dress now, but the memory of her magenta gown lingered, a symbol of the life Gideon shattered. From a corner table, she watched the bar's patrons, their laughter a stark contrast to her inner storm. She'd arranged for a delivery, a bouquet of white lilies, symbols of loss, sent to Gideon's office with a card reading, "For Nia," from an admirer. She imagined his rage, his suspicion falling on Malik Touré, the Senegalese-American rival he loathed. Her heart twisted, a pang of grief for Jelani cutting through her resolve. She sipped her sparkling water, the bubbles sharp against her lips, and closed her eyes. The jazz carried her back to her grandmother's brownstone, where cornbread and stories of Harlem nights taught her resilience. "Men will try to break you," her grandmother had said, her voice a melody over steaming plates. "But you're stronger than their fists." Nia's fingers tightened around the silver ring, her pain a fuel that burned brighter than sorrow. Gideon thought he'd crushed her, but he'd only ignited her. She opened her eyes, spotting Zola, her Harlem friend, weaving through the crowd. Zola's warm smile faltered at Nia's expression, cold, resolute, a warrior's mask. "You're planning something," Zola said, sliding into the seat beside her. Nia's hair shimmered as she leaned forward, her voice low. "He took my son," she said, each word a stone in her foundation of vengeance. "I'll take his world." Zola's eyes widened, but she nodded, her hand brushing Nia's, the silver ring cool between them. "You're Harlem's daughter," Zola said. "He can't break that." Nia's phone buzzed, a message from Zara. "He's unraveling. Saw him yell at his assistant." Nia's lips curved again, a flicker of satisfaction. She'd hired a street performer, a young man from Harlem with a knack for acting, to approach Gideon at a Wall Street gala tomorrow, whispering hints of Nia's meetings with Malik. It was a small cut, but each wound would bleed Gideon's confidence dry. Her heart ached for Jelani, but the jazz, Miles Davis's defiant notes, steeled her. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the son whose name meant mighty, for the grandmother whose voice still sang in her blood. The rain outside the bar softened, but Nia's fire burned, a Harlem-born blaze that would consume Gideon's empire. The Wall Street boardroom gleamed with cold precision, its glass walls framing Manhattan's skyline like a cage of ambition. Nia Zokora sat at the head of the Strathmore and Zokora Ventures table, her sleek waist-length hair falling in a glossy cascade over a tailored black blazer, a stark evolution from the blood-stained magenta maternity dress that haunted her dreams. Her dark eyes burned with a controlled fury, each glance a blade honed by grief. The silver ring on her finger, etched with her grandmother's crescent moon, pressed into her palm, a Harlem-born anchor to the strength that fueled her. Jelani's absence was a wound that pulsed with every heartbeat, but it drove her now, a fire stoked by the memory of Gideon Strathmore's fists and foot. The jazz of Nina Simone's "Feeling Good," heard in that Harlem bar, echoed in her mind, a defiant rhythm urging her to dismantle his world. Nia's heart was a fortress, her grief for Jelani tempered into resolve. She'd orchestrated her first moves, anonymous texts, lilies, a stage whisper at a gala, and now Gideon was unraveling, his paranoia a beast she fed with precision. Her fingers grazed a folder before her, its pages proof of his financial sins. Offshore accounts, siphoned funds, deals cloaked in lies. She'd uncovered them in her mother's Harlem brownstone, each discovery a spark in her fire. Zara Kimbrough, Wall Street's reaper, sat beside her, her sharp eyes scanning the board members. "He's coming apart," Zara whispered, her voice a low note of triumph. Nia's lips curved, not a smile but a vow. "Good," she said, her voice steady, her hair shimmering as she leaned forward. "Let him feel the cracks." Across the city in a sterile Manhattan apartment, a far cry from their penthouse, Gideon paced, his blonde hair unkempt, blue eyes bloodshot. The lilies on his desk, their scent heavy with loss, mocked him. The card's words, "For Nia, from an admirer," burned into his mind. Malik Touré's name festered in his thoughts, a rival he imagined laughing behind his back. His heart raced, a cocktail of rage and fear. The text from an unknown number, "She's mine now," replayed, each word a knife. He'd screamed at his assistant, fired 2 analysts, convinced they were spying for Malik. The memory of Nia's scream, the blood on her magenta dress, flickered, but he pushed it down, blaming her, blaming Touré, blaming everyone but himself. His empire, his pride, was slipping, and he felt it in his bones. Nia's gaze swept the boardroom, her resolve unshaken by the weight of her loss. She thought of her grandmother's Harlem kitchen, cornbread baking, jazz records spinning tales of survival. "You're stronger than their chains," her grandmother had said, her voice a melody over steaming plates. Nia's silver ring glinted, a crescent moon tying her to that strength. She rose, her hair a dark waterfall, and addressed the board. "Gideon's mismanagement threatens our future," she said, her voice clear, each word a stone in his ruin. She presented the folder, evidence of his embezzlement, millions diverted to secret accounts. The board members, faces stern, leaned forward, their trust in Gideon crumbling like ash. Gideon's phone buzzed in his apartment, another anonymous message. "You lost her. You lose everything." His hands shook, his heart pounding with a paranoia that clawed at his sanity. He saw Nia's face, her dark eyes, her vibrant dress, laughing with Malik in his mind's twisted theater. He hurled the phone against the wall, its crack echoing his fracturing world. The memory of her collapse, the blood, surfaced again, but he drowned it in bourbon, convincing himself it was her fault, her betrayal. Yet the lily's scent lingered, a reminder of his guilt, and the city's lights outside his window seemed to dim, as if Manhattan itself was turning against him. Nia sat back, her braids swaying, her heart a furnace of pain and purpose. She thought of Jelani, his name a sacred note in her soul, a melody she'd never let fade. Zara leaned in, her voice a whisper. "The board's with you. He's out." Nia nodded, her silver ring catching the light. She'd arranged one more cut, a staged call to Gideon's office, a voice mimicking Malik's, hinting at a private meeting with Nia at a Harlem jazz bar. She pictured Gideon storming there, finding only strangers and saxophone wails, his paranoia consuming him. Her grief for Jelani burned, but it fueled her, a jazz riff of justice. She wasn't just reclaiming her empire, she was avenging her son, her heritage, herself. The boardroom fell silent, the board members' nods sealing Gideon's fate. Nia's eyes lingered on Manhattan's skyline, its lights no longer mocking, but bowing to her strength. The silver ring gleamed, a crescent moon rising in her soul, whispering her grandmother's words. Build from their ruins, Nia. She would, note by note, wound by wound, until Gideon's world was as empty as her womb. The Brooklyn warehouse loomed like a forgotten hymn, its rusted beams and cracked concrete bathed in the gray light of a rain-soaked afternoon. Nia Zokora stood at its center, her sleek, waist-length hair cascading in a glossy wave over a tailored black coat, a far cry from the blood-stained magenta maternity dress that once defined her. Her dark eyes burned with a quiet, unyielding fire, forged in the crucible of grief and vengeance. The silver ring on her finger, etched with her grandmother's crescent moon, glinted as she clutched it, a Harlem-born beacon of her strength. Jelani's absence was a wound that pulsed in her chest, but it had sculpted her into something unbreakable, a warrior carrying her son's name like a sacred melody. The rain tapped the warehouse roof, a soft echo of the jazz that had carried her through Harlem's nights. Gideon Strathmore shuffled in, a shadow of the man who once ruled Wall Street. His blonde hair was matted, his suit crumpled, his blue eyes hollow with paranoia and defeat. The lilies, the anonymous texts, the staged whispers at galas, they'd unraveled him, each cut a masterpiece of Nia's design. His heart pounded, a mix of desperation and fading hope, clinging to the illusion that he could salvage something, his empire, his pride, her love. But Nia's presence, commanding and cold, shattered that hope. Her hair shimmered under the dim light, a dark cascade that seemed to absorb his last vestiges of control. "Nia," he rasped, his voice cracking. "Why am I here?" Her lips curved, not a smile but a blade. "To face the truth," she said, her voice a low jazz note, resonant with pain and power. Gideon's hands trembled, his mind replaying the accusations he'd hurled. Malekture, the imagined betrayals. "I know you're with him," he said, his voice a desperate plea. "Turi, he's behind this, isn't he?" Nia's eyes narrowed, her heart a furnace where grief for Jelani burned into resolve. She stepped closer, her hair swaying, the silver ring catching the light. "There's no Malek," she said, her words deliberate, each one a stone in his ruin. "There was only you, your jealousy, your fists, your foot." Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the weight of Jelani's name. "You took my son," she whispered, the words raw, slicing through the warehouse's silence. She pulled the silver ring from her finger, holding it up, its crescent moon a symbol of her heritage. "This was for Jelani," she said, her voice breaking but fierce. "My warrior, named for the strength of my ancestors. You stole him from me." Gideon flinched, his face paling, the memory of her blood-stained magenta dress flashing, her scream, the crimson bloom. His knees buckled, but Nia's gaze held him upright, unrelenting. "Every text, every flower, every whisper at those galas," she continued, her hair a dark veil framing her fury. "I planned them. I watched you crumble, Gideon, because you deserved to feel the emptiness you left in me." His breath hitched, his heart a storm of guilt and denial. "I didn't mean to," he stammered, tears welling in his eyes. "It was an accident, Nia. I loved you." The words were a weak defense, crumbling under her stare. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper, sharp as a saxophone's wail. "You didn't love me," she said. "You loved owning me. But I'm Nia Zokora, forged in Harlem's fire, and I own myself." Her words echoed her grandmother's jazz, Nina Simone's defiant notes, the cornbread-scented nights where resilience was born. Gideon sank to the concrete, his sobs swallowed by the rain's rhythm. Nia turned, her hair flowing like a dark river, and walked away, leaving him in the warehouse's void. She emerged into the rain, her black coat glistening, and returned to the Manhattan penthouse. Standing by the window, the skyline's lights pulsing like a jazz riff, she let her hair fall loose, its sleek strands brushing her waist. The silver ring rested in her palm, a crescent moon tying her to Jelani, to Harlem, to her grandmother's voice singing A Love Supreme. Her heart, once shattered, was now a fortress, rebuilt from grief's ashes. The city's lights shimmered, no longer mocking but celebrating her triumph. Nia's fingers traced the ring, Jelani's name a melody in her soul. She dismantled Gideon's empire, his pride, his soul, not for herself, but for her son, whose strength lived in her. The rain softened, Manhattan's pulse sinking with her own. She was Nia Zokora, a warrior born of Harlem's heart, and her justice was complete. As the rain fades over Manhattan's skyline, Nia Zokora stands tall, her sleek hair a testament to her unbroken spirit, her silver ring a silent ode to Jelani's memory. Her story, of grief transformed into justice, echoes like a Harlem jazz melody, resonating in the heart of every listener. What did Nia's journey stir in you? Did her fire ignite your own resolve, or did Gideon's fall spark questions of redemption? Share your thoughts, your feelings. Let's keep this story alive in conversation. Thank you for walking this path with Nia, for feeling her pain and triumph. Until we meet again, may you carry her strength, forged in the ashes, into your own stories.